Brought to you by Thomas Allgaier and Frennis, this edition highlights key LinkedIn posts on future mobility and market evolution in weeks 17 and 18. Frennis supports Tier 1 automotive suppliers with early-stage market validation for their R&D efforts by combining secondary research, direct OEM expert interviews, and facilitated customer meetings. You can find more info in the description. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We're jumping straight into some of the most critical future mobility trends surfacing across professional networks right now.
We really are. And, if there's one overarching through line in the curated insights you're about to hear today, it's that the entire mobility industry is transitioning.
Right, transitioning away from that, venture capital fuels, sci-fi era.
Exactly. And moving aggressively into the era of hard execution.
The era of flying car press releases and, burning cash just to grab market share that's basically over.
Yeah, the directors have finally yelled cut on the flashy visions, and now we are staring at the unglamorous, highly detailed blueprints.
The boring stuff.
The boring but necessary stuff. Unit economics, municipal friction, operational logistics. The overarching story from our sources this week is that the math is finally actually working.
It is, and the math is changing, mostly because the business models have had to mature just to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
To see exactly how that maturity is playing out, we should probably start by looking at Arthur Burnan's recent breakdown of DOT's financial fundamentals.
Oh, this was fascinating.
Because for years, the narrative around shared scooters and e-bikes was just a bonfire of capital.
Yeah, literally just setting money on fire.
Right. Operators would just drop thousands of vehicles onto city sidewalks and pray that profitability would magically materialize down the road.
Somehow.
But Burnan highlights a monumental shift here. DOT just posted a €7 million adjusted EBITDA profit.
Which is huge.
On €173 million in revenue.
I mean, I'm looking at those numbers, and pulling off a profit at a scale of nearly $200 million in revenue is a serious milestone for shared micromobility.
It really is.
But I'm stuck on one specific data point that Burnan breaks down regarding their combined fleet of 250,000 vehicles.
Yeah, the utilization rate.
Right. When you run the math on the active deployed fleet versus the revenue, it averages out to about 1.3 rides per vehicle per day.
Yeah.
I have to push back here because 1.3 rides a day means that for roughly 23 hours out of the day, that capital asset is just sitting on a sidewalk doing absolutely nothing.
Just gathering dust.
Exactly.
Ugh.
How does any company survive, let alone profit on utilization rates that low?
Well, it forces a complete mental reset on how we evaluate the industry. We used to look at shared mobility like a taxi service.
Where the goal is to constantly keep the vehicle moving with a paying passenger in the back.
Exactly. But Burnan's analysis shows that this is no longer a high-margin game driven by premium per ride pricing.
Okay.
It is entirely a logistics and operational efficiency play. The cost isn't the scooter sitting idle.
Right, because the scooter is a sunk cost?
Yes. The real cost is the human labor required to drive a van to that scooter, swap its battery, fix its brakes, or, manually rebalance it to a busier street.
Oh, I see. So if you engineer swappable batteries, build hyper-efficient routing software for your maintenance crews, and make the vehicles durable enough to withstand urban abuse, the overhead crashes.
It completely crashes. You don't need 5 rides a day if your operational cost per vehicle is just pennies.
Right. And actually, Jonas Bieniek posted an update that perfectly complements this shift in unit economics.
Oh, the Wolt partnership.
Yes. He highlighted DOT's recent partnership with Wolt, plus offering those delivery subscription members 30 free minutes of e-scooter or e-bike rides a month across multiple European markets.
Wow.
It's essentially the gym membership model applied to mobility.
And that's brilliant because by tying mobility to an existing subscription platform, operators are artificially engineering baseline demand.
Yeah, you sacrifice the high average revenue of a single impulsive ride.
But you gain retention, predictability, and a massive influx of user data.
Exactly. When you know precisely where and when your subscribers are going to ride, you can optimize your street-level logistics even further.
Which pushes those maintenance costs down to the absolute floor.
But driving those operations costs down relies heavily on the physical vehicles actually surviving the streets.
Which used to be a big problem.
A huge problem. For a long time, the public perception of micromobility was pure chaos. People tripping over scooters, riders getting into accidents constantly.
Right. It was kind of a mess.
However, the safety data coming out now is incredibly counterintuitive. Mark Nather and Lars Christian Grudem-Olsen shade insights from the Micromobility for Europe 2025 safety data.
And what did that show?
Well, shared e-bike trips jumped an astonishing 72.3%.
That's massive growth.
Massive.
Yeah.
Yet, simultaneously, the injury risk per million trips fell by 18.4%.
That is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
I mean, the immediate assumption is that flooding a city with more of a novel vehicle type would cause accidents to spike.
Just because there are more things to hit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, simply because more riders are navigating complex traffic. But Grodem Olsen introduces this safety in numbers effect, which is a well-documented phenomenon in transport research.
How does that work in practice?
It's basically a multi-layered adaptation. First, the riders themselves log more miles, transitioning from, wobbly tourists to confident daily commuters.
They get better at riding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And second, the sheer volume of riders forces municipal governments to react by deploying dedicated infrastructure, like protected lanes.
And perhaps most importantly, the drivers of 2-ton steel cars are forced to adapt, too.
Yes.
It's like walking into a crowded room versus walking down an empty hallway. The sheer presence of a crowd forces everyone to slow down, make eye contact, and change their behavior.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
But we can't pretend this safety improvement is purely organic either. It's heavily enforced by cities.
Right.
Bim and Wagdy had a brilliant observation about the situation in Paris, which is often completely misunderstood by the broader public.
Oh, Paris is a great example. Many people look at Paris and confidently declare that micromobility failed there because the city instituted a ban.
Right. You see those headlines all the time. Paris bans scooters.
But Wagdy clarifies that Paris didn't actually ban micromobility at all. They just rejected one specific chaotic operating model, the permissionless, free-floating scooter.
And replaced it with what?
They deliberately chose a highly regulated, tightly controlled, shared e-bike model instead. They restricted the market to just a few hand-picked operators. Yeah, heavily enforced parking rules and demanded rigorous safety standards.
So the philosophy of the entire industry has shifted. The early days were defined by asking for forgiveness rather than permission, just dropping hardware everywhere.
Move fast and break things.
Exactly. But Wagdy frames the future as negotiated integration. Cities and operators are now actively collaborating to build systems that earn public trust, rather than just dumping hardware on the pavement.
Well, if that negotiated integration is successfully moving millions of commuters, it naturally begs the question of whether this highly evolved, heavily regulated micromobility framework can solve something else.
Like what?
Like the absolute nightmare of commercial city logistics, moving goods instead of people.
Oh, sure.
And that brings us to an absolute hardware breakthrough shared by Daniel Ellis-Fett regarding a company called Mochi.
MOCCI.
Yeah, Mochi. They have engineered a chain-free, ride-by-wire commercial e-bike.
Ride-by-wire on an e-bike. That represents a fundamental engineering paradigm shift. We are talking about severing the physical-mechanical connection between the rider's legs and the rear wheel.
Let's actually unpack how this works because it's fascinating. On a traditional bicycle, the pedals turn a crank, which pulls a greasy metal chain, which turns a cassette of gears, which turns the wheel.
Right, the standard setup.
And the chain is the ultimate single point of failure. It snaps, it rusts, it slips off the gears.
Always when you're late, too.
Exactly. So Mochi removed the chain entirely. They removed the mechanical gears. They even removed the pneumatic tires that constantly go flat.
Wait, what? So how does it move?
Instead, when you pedal this bike, you are just turning a generator. That generator sends electricity through wires to a digital hub motor in the rear wheel.
That is wild.
And software dynamically adjusts the resistance on the pedals, so your brain still feels like you are riding a mechanical bike.
That is incredible. By eliminating the chain, the derailleur, and the air-filled tires, you are systematically removing the physical failure points that plague commercial fleets.
Exactly.
Ellis-Fett notes that this system achieves over 90% uptime. If you manage a fleet of delivery riders or field service technicians, your total cost of ownership, your TCO, just plummets.
Because you aren't constantly paying mechanics to patch tubes or replace snap chains.
Right. The vehicle stays on the road, generating revenue.
And we are seeing major logistical players internalize this exact math at a massive scale right now. Martin Anderson posted about Amazon opening its 14th German micromobility hub, this one located in Berlin.
14th, wow.
Yeah. And from this new location alone, they plan to deliver over 2 million packages a year using electric cargo bikes.
I mean, a company like Amazon operates purely on unit economics and efficiency. They do not scale a program to 14 hubs across the country just for good public relations.
Yeah, definitely not.
2 million packages delivered via cargo bike means that in dense, crowded urban environments, cargo bikes are now demonstrably faster, cheaper, and more efficient than diesel vans.
They bypass traffic completely.
They park instantly on the sidewalk without risky municipal fines, and they fundamentally decarbonize the critical last mile of logistics.
This invisible shift in how our streets operate ties perfectly into a concept Sebastian Hensler calls a mental availability or visibility.
Oh, I like this part of the deep dive.
Yeah, he highlighted a staggering discrepancy. Right now, there are nearly 2 million electric cars on the road, but there are 17.5 million e-bikes and 1.3 million cargo bikes.
That's a huge gap. We have developed a collective blind spot, I think. We obsess over electric cars.
Constantly.
We constantly debate EV charging networks, battery ranges, and gigafactories. Because a Tesla is a massive, highly visible piece of technology, it dominates our mental availability.
But Hensler's point is that the true mobility revolution has already occurred right under our noses in these smaller, cheaper, more agile form factors.
Right.
The volume of e-bikes dwarfs electric cars by a massive margin, yet we still act like micromobility is a niche novelty.
And the hardware is continually being refined to capture the few demographics that haven't adopted it yet.
Yeah, Chris Tingley actually posted a first-hand review of the newest generation of Lime bikes, noting some very specific, deliberate engineering choices they've made.
What did he notice?
Tingley highlighted that the power assist is significantly more responsive and granular, and the turning radius has been drastically tightened.
Which might sound like minor tweaks, but they solve a major adoption barrier.
How so?
Older e-bikes often suffered from, jerky acceleration at low speeds, which is genuinely terrifying for an inexperienced rider trying to navigate tight, crowded city traffic.
That makes sense. By smoothing out the power delivery and making the bike easier to handle, Lime is lowering the intimidation factor.
Exactly.
It's an engineering choice designed to make the bike feel fundamentally safe and stable for someone who would never identify as a quote-unquote cyclist. It broadens the total addressable market by making the hardware approachable to everyone.
But, if we acknowledge that millions of refined e-bikes and commercial cargo bikes are becoming the dominant volume leaders on our streets, we run into a massive physical constraint.
The streets themselves.
The cities themselves. The concrete layout of our urban centers was built entirely for cars.
Which means the physical architecture of the city has to catch up to the hardware. Justin Epiaka shared a brilliant framework for how urban planners need to rethink this transition.
I remember this.
He stated that transportation planning stops feeling abstract and bureaucratic when you shift your mindset to place, not facility.
And the psychological distinction there is profound. A facility is a bus stop.
Right.
It is a sterile concrete slab with a metal pole and a timetable. You only go there because you have to, and you want to leave as quickly as possible.
A completely utilitarian, miserable space.
Exactly. A mobility hub, however, must be a place. It needs to be a vibrant, safe, intentionally designed location where people actually feel comfortable existing while they seamlessly transition between a train, a shared e-bike, and a pedestrian walkway.
Richard Dixon actually shared a stunning real-world example of this in Malmö, Sweden, called Sedge Park.
What's Sedge Park like?
It is technically a multi-story car park, but it is constructed almost entirely from laminated timber instead of concrete.
A wooden parking garage.
Yes, and it features 1,400 square meters of solar panels, vertical gardens, rainwater reuse systems, battery storage, and an integrated shared mobility center right on the ground floor.
Wow. And the core argument Dixon makes here is really about behavioral psychology. We cannot continually lecture the public to make sustainable multimodal transport choices if we force them to interact with the exact same hostile, car-centric infrastructure we built in the 1970s.
If you build a dark, concrete bunker exclusively for cars, human behavior dictates that people will drive cars to fill it.
Right. But if the physical environment natively supports shared mobility, clean energy, and pedestrian access, that behavior becomes the path of least resistance.
And we are seeing cities move from cute, localized pilot projects to massive network-wide deployments of this concept.
Like in Berlin.
Exactly. Jonathan Bray shared his research on Berlin's aggressive expansion of mobility hubs. They aren't just dropping these beautiful integrated hubs into wealthy, gentrified neighborhoods in the city center.
No, Bray specifically visited a pilot site in Hellersdorf, a suburb way out on the eastern edge of Berlin.
Right, deep in the suburbs.
By pushing these multimodal hubs deep into the suburbs, Berlin is fundamentally changing the contract with its citizens. They are treating micromobility hubs as a non-negotiable public utility.
Ensuring that every citizen has the physical infrastructure to access an e-bike or a cargo bike, just like they have access to the subway system.
So we have established that cities are actively redesigning their physical spaces, carving out pedestrian zones, regulating micromobility, and building multimodal hubs. But how will these newly designed, highly regulated pedestrian-heavy spaces handle the impending arrival of artificial intelligence and driverless cars?
The Robotaxi reality check. This is where the tension between futuristic visions and ground-level execution is the most volatile.
For sure.
If we look at the demand side first, the data is surprisingly strong. Timo Meller shared recent McKinsey research that completely flips the narrative on who actually uses autonomous vehicles.
Oh, the replacement data.
Yes, they found that 37% of shared AV users use the Robotaxi to replace a trip they would have otherwise taken in a private car.
That data point is vital, because only 30% used it to replace a public transport trip.
Right.
The persistent fear was always that cheap robotaxis would simply cannibalize subway riders and clog the streets further. But if 37% are leaving their private cars in the driveway, robotaxis are proving to be a genuine substitute for car ownership.
This completely validates a perspective shared by Amanda Frangella. She argues that the financial markets need to stop evaluating companies like Tesla purely as legacy automakers.
How should they be viewed?
When you look at their aggressive push into robotaxis, their proprietary AI inference chips, and their humanoid robotics, she asserts they must be modeled as comprehensive AI and autonomy platform companies.
The potential scale of that platform is staggering, but the on-the-ground execution is currently stumbling over massive, complex hurdles.
Like what we saw in China.
Right. Philip Koopman provided a stark reality check on the actual deployment of these systems. He highlighted that China recently instituted a temporary, across-the-board freeze on robotaxi deployments following a massive stranding incident by Baidu's fleet in Wuhan.
I saw videos of that. When a human driver gets confused, they tap the brakes, figure it out, and keep moving.
But when an AI system encounters an edge case it cannot resolve, it simply halts.
It just stops dead.
Yeah. The Baidu incident didn't just result in a few cars pulling over safely. It caused mass, localized gridlock. It's like a train losing power on the tracks. Every single vehicle behind it is paralyzed until the obstruction is manually cleared.
Koopman also points out that in the U.S., Waymo is still struggling with deeply complex, high-stakes edge cases, such as safely navigating around school buses.
Which are notoriously tricky.
Yeah, because a school bus isn't just a large yellow object. It is an object surrounded by dynamic, legally binding context.
Right.
When its red lights flash, traffic in both directions must halt. Human drivers instantly understand this social and legal contract. Teaching a computer vision model to flawlessly interpret and react to that context 100% of the time, without fail, is proving incredibly difficult.
And even if the AI reaches perfection, there's a massive macro-level problem with how they operate, which Bojan Djukic articulated brilliantly.
Oh, the empty miles issue.
Exactly. Djukic warns that the U.S. rollout of robotaxis is mirroring the exact mistakes of the early Uber rollout in 2014.
How so?
Uber promised to take cars off the road, but all those drivers driving empty between pickups actually caused traffic congestion to explode in cities like San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
Robotaxis will amplify that problem exponentially because an AI doesn't mind endlessly circling the block empty while waiting for its next fare. Neither Beijing nor Shenzhen, which are pushing deployment aggressively, charge these vehicles for street use or per trip congestion.
So the economic incentive for a robotaxi is to stay in motion rather than pay for parking, which just clogs the urban arteries even more.
Right.
But Djukic points out that Europe is perfectly positioned to absorb this technology because their infrastructure is already actively hostile to empty, roaming cars.
Oh, that's true.
London enforces a massive, expensive congestion charging zone. Milan strictly limits city center access based on emissions. European cities have real dynamic curb pricing and extensive 30-kilometer-per-hour speed limits.
So Europe might lag the U.S. and China in total autonomous test miles, but their regulatory framework will act as a massive shock absorber.
Right.
When a robotaxi company tries to scale in London or Milan, they won't be able to let their vehicles circle the block empty because the municipal congestion charges will instantly destroy their profit margins. The strict infrastructure forces the AI to integrate efficiently.
It is a completely different operating environment. And speaking of operating environments, Andrew Miller made an observation that highlights a fascinating political irony in the U.S.
And just to remind you listening, we are impartially reporting the source's observation here without taking any sides.
Right, absolutely. But Miller points out that you might intuitively expect highly regulated, environmentally focused blue states to lead the adoption of advanced emission-reducing technologies.
Sure.
But the reality is exactly the opposite.
Miller notes that it is actually libertarian-leaning red states like Texas and Arizona that are aggressively pushing autonomous vehicle adoption. They are deeply open to automated fleets, while the blue states are far more hesitant, throwing up regulatory roadblocks.
And Miller suggests an incredible irony here. These deregulated environments in places like Texas might be the very first locations to establish the market conditions that eventually price human driving out of the market entirely.
Oh, wow.
By letting the tech scale fast, recklessly, and aggressively, they may accelerate the end of the human driver much faster than the states trying to carefully manage the transition.
Which is a brilliant synthesis of the entire mobility landscape right now. We've spent years romanticizing the technology, but the actual revolution is happening through regulatory friction, municipal infrastructure, and operational math.
It really is. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to ponder based on the deep dive we unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
If Europe's infrastructure, with its pedestrian zones, strict financial penalties for congestion, and highly integrated multimodal hubs, is already better suited to tame the inevitable chaos of robotaxis, and if these rapidly advancing AI platforms eventually make human driving a statistical liability, will private car ownership in the city simply become a luxury hobby of the past rather than a daily necessity?
That's a great question. The hardware and the AI are rapidly pushing us toward that reality, but ultimately the physical concrete design of the cities we choose to build will dictate how we actually move.
Definitely. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, new episodes drop every 2 weeks. Also check out our other editions on electrification and battery technology, next-gen vehicle intelligence, and commercial fleet insights.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today.
Yes, thank you. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an edition. See you next time.